So there are two things. So one was the distribution path. I saw Amazon and FBA as like this sort of gold mine, right? In terms of, we look at the competitors that we were going to compete against, and we look at their listings, and it was laughable. You look at Burt's Bees, right? Huge company, billion-dollar company, and they'd have the baby shampoo, and it'd be like 12-ounce baby shampoo. That's their description, the whole thing. That's it.
How does Clorox, the owner of that, fuck that up so bad? Tell me.
In the beginning, I have no idea. But we looked at this, and I started to look across the market, and I was like, Paul, this is where we launch. We use FBA. FBA was brand new. At that time, when we launched in late 2013, Amazon was, for a whole year, all SEO, not a single ad. And it was glorious, right? You go in, you optimize titles, keywords, and bullets, and descriptions and stuff. It was amazing.
Welcome to Forward Obsessed, where we talk to breakthrough business leaders and rising entrepreneurs about their journeys, origin stories, and aha moments.
Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Forward Obsessed. I'm your host, Pete Senna. David couldn't be here today because he's too busy launching his next biggest business. So, Dave, good luck with that. Can't wait to see how that's going. On this episode, I've got Sean Busch, who's a friend, and I'm really excited because this is actually the first time, Sean, that on the show, I am quite literally bringing my checkbook and writing a check to invest in Sean's business. And for those of you that know, we're 60-something episodes in, I think, if my memory shoots me right. I've actually never written a check as an investment on the show, but I just got a sneak peek of the business plan. I dug into everything, and I'm in, man. So I guess I'm not just a host anymore. I'm also an investor.
That's right. I'm honored. I appreciate you jumping in. It's great to have great people involved in these companies. So psyched to talk about it today.
Stoked, man. So listen, let's start from the beginning. So you've done a bunch of stuff. I mean, obviously, Puracy, you've been hustling since you were a kid. So let's start from the beginning. Where did the seeds of entrepreneurship come from? Where'd you grow up? What'd your family do? And I want to just get into the psyche and the mind of you in terms of where the journey start from.
Yeah, so I grew up in a little town called Shoreham, New York, which is not really known for much, except for now the Tesla Museum is there. Because Nikola Tesla's lab was in Shoreham. And graduating class of 180, but my parents were both entrepreneurs. My dad ran a computer repair business. My mom ran a garden design and maintenance business in the Hamptons. So I saw small business sort of throughout my life, and I saw the ups and downs with it, but I also saw kind of the element of my parents doing something that they either gravitated towards or they enjoyed, and they found ways to make money to do so. And that's kind of what they portrayed on me was, how do you do something that you like and make money doing it? That's kind of their basic pitch to me. They weren't, tremendously successful, but they kind of got by and they did their thing and they enjoyed what they were doing. And I also saw sort of the dirty underbelly of entrepreneurship. And for me, the risk was worth it from day one. So, I started, I worked traditional jobs. I worked in pizzerias and delivered pizzas and lifeguard and that kind of thing. And it was super boring for me. And, so I started to get involved in cars. I loved cars since I was a little kid. Always have, still do today. And so I started off with buying, these, so now everything's LED, but back then it was, blue light bulbs for your headlights and, clear corners. And so I'd buy them for kids at school and I would sell them at a markup and then install them, for an additional markup on their cars. And then that sort of gravitated into car detailing. And I saw car detailing as a way for me to almost kind of express myself and that how detail oriented I was and how particular I was about all the sort of finite details. And I started that when I was 16. It was the first business I had.
Curious. So siblings?
Yes. Brother and sister, both younger.
Okay. Entrepreneurs or? No. So you're the only entrepreneur?
Yes.
And you said you're the oldest?
Yes.
Interesting. So when I think about entrepreneurship, obviously you've built some venture scale businesses, you've had exits, et cetera. You've built small businesses. Your family, entrepreneurs, certainly, but small business owners, right?
Correct.
In some cases. So growing up as the son of small business owners, what was it like growing up? Like when you think about what was your earliest memory of business? Tell us a story about the first time you sort of watched your parents either struggle or succeed or whatever it was, and you had that kind of light bulb moment happen. How old were you? Tell us the time, because I know there's a story there.
Yeah, so I think it was probably between 10 or 11 years old when I started to kind of pay attention to it. Before that, you're just kind of I'm a kid, I'm being a kid. But, I started to realize that I was being asked to kind of help out, right? And so
cheap labor.
Yeah, exactly. And so, you kind of say like, well, what does this look like? So for my mom's business, she goes and works on people's gardens in the Hamptons. You'd be in the car at 5:45 in the morning.
Oof.
And you're like,
at 10, 11, that sucks.
Yeah, exactly. Just in the summer, right? But still, it was kind of very eye-opening that this is how it goes, right? And you get paid for it, but at the same time, it wasn't something that I loved, but I understood that like this contributes to the family and this helps put food on the table. And same thing with my dad's business. You start off in the back where you kind of walk in where they were at the time repairing computers, way back when. And he's like, job. Clean this up. Right. And you kind of go back there and it's you don't even know what's back there. You don't know half the things that you're looking at, but you just try to find ways to make some order around it. And
because you're a pretty clean, organized guy, but we're going to get to that.
Correct.
Yeah. So that started at a young age too.
That's grunt work, right?
Yeah.
But you sort of realize like, okay, this is where you start, right? You got to start at the bottom. You got to learn just really, really basic stuff. And then, you kind of see what they're going through. What's my mom doing during the day? What's my dad doing during the day? And then sort of how their days flow was interesting for me to see. And then I think, some of the tougher times came probably in my later teenage years when business wasn't as good for my dad. And I think there's some issues there that, he saw wasn't paying enough attention to the business and where the market was going. And you sort of lose grip, right? Yeah. If you don't keep your eye on the ball and you aren't working long hours and working hard and hiring the right people. And that's some things that, I keep in mind to this day of like, don't go down that path.
Now, I spent some time, obviously, in the Hamptons in my later years, but, I grew up a pretty broke kid. Would you say that, like, you and your family, were, not to sort of over-dramatize it, but, like, people in the Hamptons have a lot of money. Mm-hmm. And I'm assuming if you guys are small business owners, they were in a different class than you from a financial perspective. So you were sort of servicing them and that sort of thing. What did you learn about the segmentation of classes, right? In terms of like, because a lot of people are in that top, 1-5% of income in the country if they've got places in the Hamptons, either summer places or whatever it is. What did you learn about customers and serving the customer, being in the business of, fixing someone's broken computer, which is obviously really important, or being in the business of taking care of someone's, beautiful property from a gardening perspective? I want to just understand that because I'd imagine something I really picked up on you. One of the reasons I'm excited to be an investor is the way you think about the customer journey. Yeah. And something is a huge part of who you are. Would you say that came about from like being 10-year-old Sean and kind of getting into that mindset?
100%. Yeah. I saw it really early on because I saw how passionate my mom was. She was not a good business owner at all. Like a lot of the stuff that she did, she was not good at. And the reason that she was at least reasonably successful in my mind, was able to keep the business afloat and be profitable and actually make money was her passion and the way that she portrayed that to her customers. Like her customers, you don't need a gardener, right? It's a very luxury item. You can have a landscaper, right? Probably at a minimum, but you don't need a gardener. And so the people that had gardeners, right? This is just above and beyond. And they saw her, and I watched the way that she spoke to them and how she described each flower and how these different layers came together and how things would bloom at different times of the year so that you'd always have color. And then, you look at these people where these are probably business people or whatever. They have no idea what she's talking about, but they know passion when they see passion.
Yeah. It's like a chef describing food, right?
It's exactly right. It's exactly right. And so for me, I kind of saw that and I said, okay, like that's the selling point, right? That is, you have to surprise and delight the customer always. And you have to really kind of, what I've tried to take a step beyond that is to speak their language a little bit more, ask questions that are, like, why do you like this? What interests you about this? What are your end goals with this? And that's kind of how I ended up down the CPG journey. But in terms of really highlighting those people, I think it's super important to, come from the lens of passion, knowledge, expertise, and then just a little bit of humbleness as well, right? Yeah. Just don't get over your skis.
Yeah, for sure. No, I want to unpack something because you said that really struck me, which is I'm a craftsperson. Your mom was a craftsperson. You're a craftsperson in a lot of ways, like detailing cars and kind of getting your hands dirty and whatnot. A lot of my first early companies were service-based companies. I'm a designer developer. The people listening to the show know this. You know this from knowing me. Why do you think there's such a divide between craftsmanship and commerce. And what I mean by that specifically, you said, my mom loved her craft, was amazing at it. I'm paraphrasing, but she was a bad business person. Why do you think that the best business people are not craftsmen and the best craftsmen are not best business people? It seems like that's a trope that keeps showing up. And I'd love to get your take on it, because you've had to now evolve past being the craftsman to now building the commerce enterprise. So I want to understand just a little of that psychology, because you got me thinking about myself a little bit there.
I think it is such a fine line that you have to walk. And I think it's a moving target always, depending upon where you're at, right? And depending upon what market you're in, right? Certain markets have the appetite for a little bit more of an expensive product or service. But you really have to think about the true craftsman. There are very few examples of like true craftsmen like being successful. I think Singer Automotive is one of them, right? Yep. They build these sort of no budget cars that are well into the millions of dollars. They're 3-4 years out, and people pay whatever. Yeah. But that's
Ferrari, Lamborghini, similar.
Yeah, exactly. But that's like the 1% of the 1%, right? Yeah. It's super, super rare. So I think that, launching a mass product, a mass business like Dad Mode, right? You have to think about what matters the most to people. Like and that's what I try to do always. Like what is the real sort of primary and secondary endpoints? And I think that's a little bit of the stuff that I kind of took from my days in medical sales, just looking through these clinical trials and realizing, okay, this is what we're going after. Boom. This is the outcome, and this is the second outcome that we're looking at. Yeah. And so you sort of have to break it down further. And for my mom, like she'd get really, really into the weeds, no pun intended, but just thinking about, different flowers and like, can I get something more exotic if I go to the city or Philadelphia Flower Show? And you kind of have to pull back and say, do your customers really care, right? Like, do they care about that, or do they just want some color in their garden during the early months or the late months? And those are like kind of the key pieces, the bookends of the season. So it's something that's super nuanced. It's something that I think about all the time, because it is very, very easy to just go, I'm going to make the best possible thing I can make. And your CFO looks at you and be like, no, this isn't going to work.
Yeah. So it's really, what I'm hearing is sort of knowing what execution looks like, knowing what vision looks like, and sort of being able to modulate, like you said, that moving target and walk that fine line, or tightrope, dare I say, and go from there. So you mentioned some of your early jobs. I mean, one of the things I want to think about the audience now that I'm a dad, and funny, Dad Mode's the brand, is that I'm really thinking about what lessons can I and should I instill in my kid. My son's 3.5 years old. I know you've got young kids as well. One of the things I think a lot about is leadership principles. I come from tech, so like my superpower was the craftsman, right? I could code anything, I could design anything, and I think that I put too much energy into the color of the flowers early on versus what my margins and landing costs are, and those kinds of things in my world, right? But my question for you is, being at a pizzeria, selling clear corners for cars when you were a kid, like what does that teach you, and why would you recommend someone go and do that first before they become an entrepreneur? Like, what do you learn of that? Because clearly, and I think the answer to my question might be sales, because that's the next thing that you're going to talk about. But what did some of those sort of, dare I say, dirty jobs or hard jobs teach you about how to be an entrepreneur?
I think, one big one, the obvious one, is like what you don't want to do, right? You sort of like, I crossed that off the list. But I think there's also an element of, having that grit. And I think that's something that the more sort of business people that I talk to and listen to on podcasts and such, that's something that comes up a lot, is grit, right? Grit, perseverance, execution, develop a narrative. And I think that grit is really, it's really important. I think the wisdom that you get of working with people and talking about money, hey, this is, so one of the early conversations, I sell these, let's say, clear corners. Let's say they're $20. I sell them for $25, and then I charge $10 to put them in, right? Just use some round numbers. And then, one of the customers or my fellow classmates comes and says, like, well, these are $20. And I'm like, yeah, but my time's worth something, and I have to charge a markup on here. Like everybody else is going to charge a markup. If you went to a store and had this done at a car aftermarket,
AutoZone or whatever,
something, they may charge you $100, right, to do this. So having those conversations as like a 15-year-old, not many are having those,
right?
And so that sort of kicked off my the standpoint of having really difficult conversations. And now I sort of seek them out, right? I love having difficult conversations, whether it's personal or professional, just because I think that you just cut through so much crap. And if you're sort of confident enough in yourself to ask those questions and then also potentially be rejected, potentially have that standpoint of somebody coming back and saying like, well, that's BS, right? I'm not going to pay you for this. And you say, well, all right, that's fine, right? So go find someone else to do it.
Yeah.
And potentially, tarnish a friendship or something a little bit like that until people come around. But I think that's what it taught me a lot about, was like having those difficult conversations.
My sensei used to always say to me when I was younger, strong jaws get made by getting punched in the face.
That's good.
Right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I just remember that now. It's like, like to get to yes, you need a lot of no's, right?
That's right.
So, I learned a lot from, I think, my martial arts teacher and then my co-founder. I wish he was here today, Dave. He could sell water to a well. He's just, when he's got conviction for something, believes in something, he focuses on, what is that transformation for the customer? And it's not about him. It's not about the thing he's selling. It's about how is this going to make the person's life better, right? So in my case, if it's clear corners, right, it's like, I don't want to put those damn things in because I'm going to wire them up wrong. I'm going to break it wrong. And
That's right.
and you're going to come in and just get it done for me. So it's convenience, right? So take us forward. So you get into medical sales.
Yeah.
And you got pretty damn good at that. And obviously it's pretty lucrative, right? If you get into that field. How'd you get into medical sales? Was it just a job that like had a high price tag on it and you're like, I'll do this?
No, not at all, actually. So I was running this detailing company from 16 and then I ran it into college on the side. So like probably 3 weekends out of the month, I would go and I went to school at Quinnipiac, right down the road from here, go Bobcats. And I would go down to Fairfield County and Westchester County on the weekends. And I created those accounts and those relationships from posting all my work to the early social media, which is online discussion forums. Car forums, detailing forums, and then people would find me and say, hey, look, I have this car collection, whatever, I have this Porsche, I need it detailed. And so I'd start doing that and I helped put myself through college. When I sort of got to the end of college, I had a couple of like real big clients down in Fairfield County, and they, one of them was like, look, you either got to figure out how to scale this thing or get out. And I was like, yeah, you're probably right. And, he was kind of like, hey, have you thought about anything in the corporate world? And at that point I was a little bit lost, right? I was a little bit kind of like, hey, I'm doing well. I'm making a lot of cash, but looking back, it's not
for how long? Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
And also it was 100% required on me, right? All the paint correction things I did, only I could do that, right? It would take a long time to train somebody else to do it.
Yeah, you can't fuck up somebody's Porsche.
Correct. Yeah.
Or else your reputation's
or Ferrari
dead.
or whatever.
Yeah.
And so, he kind of said to me, hey, I think you should consider pharmaceutical sales. And, at the time I knew nothing about it. And I was like, I don't know anything about this. And he's like, well, but you're passionate and you're detailed and you have good salesmanship and you are somebody that could speak to people, of authority. And so he's like, come interview at my company. And so I was like, cool. And then I realized like afterwards that he's the CEO of a pharmaceutical company. So I interviewed there and I guess probably helped a little bit to get the job there. And then I worked there for a couple of years.
You're calling on doctors were your primary customer?
Correct.
So I'd imagine that was pretty easy for you because you're like, I'd imagine a lot of your detailing customers with the high-end cars are also doctors.
That's right.
So you're like, I'm used to dealing with people who have high net worth. So now I'll go deal with these professionals. And
instant touch point for me. But I also realized that job, which is, doesn't really exist anymore in that capacity. But at the time, it was a 10 to 2 job, really. I mean, you could get it done. It was a really cush job. And I'd be out there at like 8 every morning and I'd be working till 9 o'clock at night. And my colleagues would be like, what the hell are you doing? And I'm like, I'm 23 years old, 22
single
years
at the time?
I was with my wife.
So you were married at that time?
No, I was actually
just relationship.
Yeah, we were just dating.
That's what I meant by single. Not like bachelor, but like more so like no kids, no wife, like
right.
Yeah.
So yeah, just girlfriend, a couple of dogs. And so I was putting in these crazy hours and I was like, what are you doing? I was like, well, I'm trying to get out. Like, I'm not trying to be a pharmaceutical rep for my entire life. So I lasted barely 2 years there. And then one of the doctors who I created this big connection through cars over was like, you need to get out. And then he made an intro to me over to a device company, J&J, and was like, you need to interview with them and started with there. And that was that. So,
that's awesome. We have a guy here on campus who was on the show before, had a, I think it was $100+ million exit to ConMed, who's now in the building here. So I know the medical device and pharma business can definitely, if you have the right angle, it can be lucrative for sure.
Very.
But clearly the side that you were on is, was kind of a means to an end. Clearly, because you weren't necessarily creating the drugs or creating the products, you were like selling the products. So you wanted more control over the whole system. So
yes,
where's this idea of like Puracy come from? And just for the audience that doesn't know you like I do, like what was Puracy?
Yeah. So the sort of journey beyond that, I worked in medical devices, and shortly after, I was actually still running the detailing company on the side.
Oh, really?
I had 2 clients, big car collections. One of them was like, hey, I'm moving my company from Greenwich to Austin. I was like, okay, great. 4 months later, he calls me. He's like, I can't find a good detailer. Can I fly you down with all your stuff and you could do my cars for a week? And I was like, yeah. He's like, all right. So he flew my wife and I down first class, all my stuff. We stayed with him and his girlfriend. Thought it was the coolest thing ever, right?
Yeah.
A young kid.
I've never flown my detailer first class or anywhere.
So like we get down there and like, so during the day I detail his cars, he'd go to work and then, come home at night. It's like, where do you want to go to dinner? We go to dinner. It was like, this is a great time. And then at the last day, he's like, I want you to come work for me. Got it. So he owned an e-com company, CPG e-com company, specializing in of the month clubs, wine of the month, beer of the month, bacon of the month, everything else, right? And so he wanted me to bring me on as biz dev director.
And you know nothing about e-commerce at the time at all.
So to give you an idea, first day I get there and he's like, all right, we're going to talk about pay-per-click advertising, right? And I thought he was talking about paperclip advertising. And so like for a couple of days, that's all I thought it was. And I was like, tell me about this paperclip advertising that, paid per click. And so,
wow, I feel like a moron.
Yeah. So like, I just jumped in there and I said, well, why did you bring me into this? Right. Like I moved. So it took about a year to get there. Right. And I moved across the country and I was like, we're going to give this a couple of years. And my wife and I, we wanted to move to a city and we couldn't figure out which one. And so that was the one. And
Austin wasn't like the Austin it is today, right? Like it wasn't the startup capital. Now it's like everyone's there.
Right.
You're just like, all right, it's just cool. Good weather, whatever.
Good weather. A lot of really nice people, good food, good music scene. It just seemed like it's a big city, but it wasn't New York, right? So it was like a much more tight knit. And so, we went down there and I sort of self-taught myself with him and the rest of his team. And a year in, like I did my first acquisition for them.
Oh, wow.
And then, 8 months later, I did another acquisition for them. And I was like, this is awesome. Like, I love e-com. Like, it's just, your products are selling 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. You're able to get all these analytics on people and like realize, what their buying patterns look like. How did they get here? And so I just got obsessed with it. It was so cool. And then, so then 2 years in, my deal flow dried up and I'm living in South Austin and meet my neighbor and realize we're both Green Bay Packers fans. And he was running a financial.
I won't hold that against you, by the way.
What's that?
I won't hold that against you.
That's right. We already lost. It's okay. So we just started playing ping pong in his garage like late at night, and we just started talking about different business ideas because he was running a financial publishing newsletter company, all e-com as well.
That was a good business back then.
Yeah, it was. And so, we were both in the midst of family planning, and he had just found out he was pregnant with him and his wife were pregnant. We were trying, and we were reevaluating like everybody does when they have kids. What's underneath my sink? What's in my laundry room? What is the stuff I need to get out of here? It's like one of those key pivotal moments. And we heard about, both of our wives were reading Jessica Alba's book on The Honest Company. Mm-hmm. And so, we were trying out these products. I was like, look, Paul, I have a lot of experience in product dev, chemical development, and how to really make these products sing to the customer.
From the detailing world.
From the detailing world, yeah. And so, he's like, put together a business plan. So I put together a business plan and then we started to meet more seriously. And he's like, let's do this.
How'd you learn all that stuff? I mean, obviously, like nowadays we got ChatGPT, we got AI, we got Google, YouTube. I mean, you can get information anywhere, right? Mm-hmm. But back then, we're talking, what year was this? This was around.
So this was 2011.
Yeah. So internet's pretty refined at that point, but like still
maybe 2012.
Yeah. But answers didn't grow on trees like they do today, right? So how'd you learn about business plans and acquisitions? Was he like just a really good mentor, or did you just kind of like figure it out as you went along?
Yeah, it was a little bit him sort of guiding me, and it was a little bit, a little bit gut feel for sure.
Nice.
A little bit, just sort of figuring out, all right, this is a gifting company. What are some other gifting companies that can kind of add on? We're looking for something really profitable, something that can kind of plug in with, minimal friction points, not many employees, on and on and on. So
the idea is born. Puracy is born at this point now.
So now like the sort of job that I moved down there for was, coming to a conclusion.
Sure.
I started Puracy sort of on the side at that point. And then, it's sort of things kind of came to a head at the end of 2013. And so Paul put funding in. He's like, look, I'm going to fund this thing. Here are the certain milestones that, I want to hit, but, we're going to be partners on this.
Right. So friends and family, not VC at this point.
It was just him, actually.
Just him.
So
him and you were partners. You basically, he's writing the check and supporting you, and you're the operator making it happen.
That's right.
Interesting. Yep. I hear a theme that I want to bring up because I think I hear this a lot, and the audience will appreciate this, I think, which is you've got the thing that's paying the bills, and you got the side hustle. You had the side hustles before side hustles were side hustles, right? Now everyone's got a side hustle. But what do you think having a side hustle first before going all in the thing does for you, financially, emotionally, strategically? Because clearly everything you've done so far that you've described, and a lot of guests have come on the show and said this, have done it that way. Like, why would you suggest that way for others?
Well, I think it sort of lessens your risk, right? In terms of, at that time, like, you don't have a ton of money. It's more or less paycheck to paycheck, right?
Sure.
A little bit more. But you're still trying to figure out, does it make sense to take a risk? And I think that's where the conversations that I have now with people who are thinking about getting into a business or trying to get into a business, that's the big thing that I talk to them about. I was like, everybody's got a great idea. Who's going to execute on it? Because most people are not. Like, the overwhelming majority of people will not.
Yeah.
And so for me, like, I had kind of built up this relationship. I had this partnership. I had, a couple friends look at the terms on it. Like, hey, is there anything in here that's going to be a gotcha where all of a sudden I'm sort of caught my pants down?
Sure.
And so, it came back as, no, like it looks pretty fair, actually, like a little bit favorable to you. He's taking a bet on you, really.
Right.
And so, and then how did I get to that sort of pivotal point of canceling the last one and starting the new one?
Yeah.
I got fired, actually.
Really?
Yeah, I was getting to the end of the year and
just weren't hitting numbers, and they're just kind of cutting back.
Yeah, so like I said, the deal flow dried up.
Yep.
I was managing corporate sales as well. It just wasn't going well. But honestly, I was kind of sticking around because bonus paid out at the end of the year. And I was like, all right, it'd be great to have like just a little bit of a nest egg to go ahead and pad me into this new venture, depending upon like what this looks like.
Yeah.
And I got like fired a month before Christmas.
So no bonus, just bone.
That's right. Yeah. So you work 11 months and that's it. And, at the time I was really ticked off about it, but
rage and revenge fuels companies, man.
That's right.
A lot of good stories there.
So like, that's how I looked at it.
I love that. So talk to me about, just in the audience, about what was the vision for Puracy? I mean, at this time, mid 2000s, I think, we had this e-com bubble happening. We had, everyone's trying to jump into DTC. Everyone's trying to find different ways to sell everything. Previously you had, experience in the sort of deal of the month type of things. That's quite different than launching a CPG company. So like, what was your sort of USP, and like, what made Puracy different than, all the other brands? Unilever used to be a longtime client of mine. I've done work with P&G, like, back in my agency days. Like, why was Puracy different?
Yeah. So there are two things. So one was the distribution path. I saw Amazon and FBA as like this sort of gold mine, right? In terms of, we look at the competitors that we were going to compete against, and we look at their listings, and it was laughable. You look at Burt's Bees, right? Huge company, billion-dollar company, and they'd have the baby shampoo, and it'd be like 12-ounce baby shampoo. That's their description. The whole thing. That's it.
How does Clorox, the owner of that, fuck that up so bad? Tell me.
In the beginning, I have no idea. But we looked at this, and I started to look across the market, and I was like, Paul, this is where we launch. We use FBA. FBA was brand new. At that time, when we launched in late 2013, Amazon was, for a whole year, all SEO, not a single ad. And it was glorious, right? You go in, you optimize titles, keywords, and bullets and descriptions and stuff. It was amazing. And you optimize for reviews, right? So I saw the writing on the wall, mainly because I found one particular company that, was in the detailing space. Leather conditioner and cleaner was, a big part of course, that process. And I found this company called Leather Honey, and I looked at them and I was like, I have never heard of this company, and they're the number one leather conditioner. How is that possible? How are they beating Meguiar's and Lexol and all these other ones? And you looked at their listing, you're like, the listing's really good. They have a lot of reviews. And so like, I reached out to the owner and I said, hey, tell me about what you're doing, right? Maybe we'll acquire you. Who knows? And so, and we're actually friends to this day, but I did that and I was like, this is the key, right? This is the distribution path that we need to get into, because I don't know how to get into retail. I think D2C is going to be really tough, right? And expensive for CPG products.
Definitely.
The second piece was doing consumer research, like detailed consumer research on that market. Okay, what was Jessica Alba doing well? How could we sort of find our own niche? And the niche that we found was like, we went out to all our friends who were like becoming moms. We're like, what are some of the kings that you're looking for when you look for a laundry detergent or baby shampoo or dish soap for your children's stuff, your soon-to-be child stuff. And this word pure kept coming back. I want something pure and clean and natural. But the pure aspect kept coming back. And so I started playing around with different brand names and, came up with Puracy, the state of pure. The domain existed and it was free, effectively, right? Nobody registered it.
That's awesome.
But the state of pure was really kind of the big driving force from the outset.
Interesting. Now, at that time, were the Branch Basics and the brands like that around, or were you sort of before all that?
Before.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you really kind of hit that first mover advantage in that case.
We did, yeah. Especially on Amazon.
Now, talk to us about just like, I know you said you had Paul was his name?
Yes. So
Paul kind of put in the cash. Like so you're basically a seed funded business. Mm-hmm. What was the seed amount?
$290 total.
Okay.
So it was broken up over 3 different checks over the course of, I think, 12 months or so.
Right. So you took a $290,000 cumulative seed round over a couple of different tranches and turned it into over $100 million in revenue.
100 million total revenue. Yeah. Yeah. We launched that business with about 20K, which is bananas. Four products, design fees, labels. I mean, granted, we're doing production runs of like 250 to 500 units each.
So you're not a stretch a dollar.
Yeah. Yeah. So like I went back to one of my fraternity brothers from college who was a designer, and I was like, we need your help. He had no idea what he was doing with package design, but we just figured you just hack it together, right?
Yeah.
And you just test it with people that you know, and you kind of put it out there. And, we had a lot more exposure at that time because Amazon was less competitive. So,
So is it basically just like you dropped on Amazon, or did you do Amazon plus Shopify plus all that?
Just Amazon.
Just Amazon.
Yep. January 4th, 2014 was our first sale. It was a woman from Alaska bought our surface cleaner. And
Thank you.
It's just crazy.
How many SKUs did you launch with that first?
4.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you all locally sourced, like you basically figured out all the ingredients, the whole thing, and made it happen?
So we found a chemist and production facility in Racine, Wisconsin.
Nice.
So there are a couple of ex-SC Johnson folks. And
how does somebody go and do that, right?
You just scour the internet.
You just glue your face off.
Scour the internet. And then I had the knowledge from when I helped these chemical manufacturers in the detailing space develop their products of how to kind of talk their lingo and, talk about flash foam and foam height and foam carry height and all these different sort of technical terms. And they're like, oh, wow, you actually know what you're talking about. And so, sort of help that process move along a lot faster. And then what it ended up being was as we started to scale Puracy and I started to be this connective tissue between the customer and the chemist, I took all this information from the customer. We poll every single customer. That was the big thing about Amazon back then was you could contact everyone.
Yeah, you can't do that now. So
very easily.
So you had that first party data. You knew who they were.
Correct. We knew who they were. I could ask them questions. And they're like, oh, wow, a founder is reaching out to me. Like, when's the last time a founder of like Burt's Bees or Tide? Never, right?
Yeah.
Not even an executive, nobody. And
so they'll happily talk your ear off. Yeah.
Yeah. So exactly. I was like, I happily talk to you about this stuff. And so I take all that stuff in, I put it in a spreadsheet, and then I kind of break it down at the end of each month. And I would say, all right, here are the things we need to fix. Here are the things we need to improve. And then what I do was I'd go back to those people who had, critiques, right? Maybe not publicly, but they come to me like, look, lavender is a little bit too strong on this. Like, I feel like you have a lavender and vanilla hand soap. I need to have a better balance. And so I'd come back to them like 2 or 3 months later. I'm like, we took your feedback into consideration. We fixed it. Please confirm your delivery address. I'm going to send you a new bottle. And they're just like,
yeah, customer for life at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And awesome. So we just rinse and repeat that.
Now, I'd imagine that growth trajectory from that January sale to getting to plus 100 million was not this sort of like straight line, amazing moment that the social media shorts talk about, right? So what was that journey like? Like, when did you really get that flywheel cooking? Like, what were some of the big moments that happened where you're like, now this thing is just like rapid scaling? Yeah.
I think one of the big ones was our first new product, which is our stain remover.
Okay.
And it's one of the reasons that it's a big product for Dad Mode as well. Stain remover is such an interesting product segment because it's such a binary experience. Mm-hmm. It works or it doesn't work. That's all people care about, right? And so we looked at it, and there's 2 different mechanisms of action really to kind of clean stains off of laundry. And we wanted to go with the enzyme version versus the oxygen bleach, like OxyClean type of version. And, we launched that on Amazon, and it went crazy. It went crazy. And then a couple of publications picked it up. And then we started to get a lot of traction. And then before you knew it, we were in like top 5 bestseller, top 2 bestseller. And for a little while, we were top 1 bestseller.
Wow.
And so
this is all Amazon.
All Amazon.
Insane.
All Amazon. And then you'd have these...
And all to individuals too? Or are you getting a lot of like wholesale accounts or
No
B2B
wholesale.
accounts? No wholesale at all.
All direct.
Wow.
All just consumers, yeah.
Wow.
And so you start to get this sort of this buzz around the brand and these cheerleaders around the brand. And especially for people are like, look, these are pure ingredients and it actually works.
Yeah.
It's like, what a concept, right? How could this happen? And so like we kind of hit gold.
Did you sort of like intentional? I'd imagine like moms went crazy on social over it because that was like sort of like at this time we've got Facebook, Instagram. This is pre-TikTok, right? But like, were you sort of organically just leaning into that, or was that part of the strategy, or did it just moms just took it to the next level for you?
They helped take it to the next level. I think that's, when I talk about sort of misses of where we missed, I think social is one we definitely missed on at Puracy.
Really?
Yeah, we didn't spend a lot of time. We never had a real strategy behind it. We sort of hacked things for so long and just did, how can we optimize Amazon on and on and on and on and on.
Yeah.
That when we got to those points where it was like, all right, now it's time for retail, D2C, social, we were a little bit behind the 8 ball.
Yeah, that was actually my next question is, so like you get to a point with Amazon, what was the sort of like peak revenue moment at Amazon where you're like, okay, now we need to start opening up on other channels?
So it kind of came to us. Okay. And that's where like with Dad Mode, like kind of the reason I want to go and do it again and do it differently is to take the steps a little bit more deliberately rather than them falling on your doorstep.
Well, it's like Steve Jobs says, right? You can't connect the dots looking forward. You got to connect them looking back.
That's right. And so for us, it's like we got to the end of 2017. We were doing over $10 million on Amazon. I was the only employee.
Wow.
It was awesome.
Solopreneur life hacks by Sean.
And so it was great. And I loved it. And I was like spinning out of control in terms of like I had no hobbies whatsoever. And it was fine. Like I was in it. I was in the moment.
And you got little kids too at the point, right?
No, at that point.
That's pretty good.
So like at the end of 2017, yes, we had a daughter.
Okay.
But that was it. And like, I feel bad a little bit. It's kind of where Dad Mode now, right? Because, you sort of take that time away and you can't get it back.
Yeah. But you're also setting them up for the future.
Correct.
So in some cases you can't get the time back, but like sometimes it's a sacrifice we make.
It's right. It's a balance, right? So yeah, we got to that point, and then in mid 2018, Bye Bye Baby and Babies R Us and Toys R Us went out of business.
Right.
And I got approached, and we had tried to get into Target in 2017. It didn't really go anywhere. And I got a call in June of 2018, and it was a broker. He's like, look, I just left 7th Gen. I was the head of sales at Target for 7th Gen. Before that, I held 3 different buyer roles at Target. I've followed you guys for a long time. I want to represent you. Can we go and have a line review with the baby buyer in 3 weeks? And I was like, yeah.
What was his ask? Like hire me, or like he wanted a fee, or like how'd that?
He wanted exclusivity. He saw how fast we were growing. He saw what we were doing. We were kind of nipped on the heels of 7th Gen in certain categories. Yeah. And
you're like, hell yeah.
He's like, you need to be in retail. And so then what happened was we started to create an expanded baby product portfolio very quickly. It's like 3 weeks. I mean, we came with, bottles with paper labels on them, but we had designed different things. We had come up with formulas. Like we just moved mountains to make this happen, which no other kind of big company could do in 3 weeks.
Did you still have to deal with all like the slotting fees and all that kind of stuff? So basically he just frontlined you because of his relationships.
We sat down with the buyer. Sick. And he's like, he's like, they had their golf buddies and stuff, and like, and so he sat down.
Relationship is key here, because what I'm hearing 100%. Is like getting into retail. A, it's hard.
Yep.
B, it's expensive, and C, it takes a lot of time. And I'd imagine as a solopreneur, as a one-man band, you probably weren't taking a lot of that cash out and putting it in the pocket. You're probably putting it right back into growth, right?
Right.
So in that case, really, I think that the audience here, if you're listening, if you're starting a business now and you're a founder, I know a lot of you are. Power relationships, right? It's like, it's the golf buddies and the things like that are going to really make the world go round. So
it's huge. And like, that same broker is going to help out, with Dad Mode. So yeah, we sat down. It was a 22-minute meeting. We talked about it. And he's like, look, we're absorbing most of the market share from Babies R Us going out of business, and we're expanding our assortment, and I'm getting more space, and I want to put, a new brand in. And I kind of walked him through the brand ethos and what we were doing. And he's like, look, some of the buyers look at Amazon as the devil. I look at it as an incubator, as, okay, if you guys are doing over 10 million sales and you're not in retail, like that's something to pay attention to.
Yeah.
And so if I don't pay attention to it, then one of my competitors is going to pay attention to it. And I was like, well, thank you for being forward thinking.
Yeah. So you started turning on retail. So how many stores initially? Like just like what brands, what stores, like at a high level?
So high level, probably about 500 of the Target stores with our baby products.
Awesome.
And then, our broker told us like, look, the others are going to start to fall in place. Like once one buyer commits, we were in personal care, baby care, household cleaning, and laundry. And so he's like, once one commits, the others are going to be a lot more likely to commit because there's just less risk for them if it doesn't go right. And so that's what we used. We used that as the sort of the narrative. And so our broker was awesome, right? He, at the times before COVID, he'd have, meetings every single day at Target, coffee, lunch, afternoon coffee, every day.
Yeah.
And so he had all these relationships.
Just eating out of the palm of his hand. Yeah.
It was great.
Yeah.
So, we started Target and then Walmart took notice and then we got into Walmart about a year and a half later.
This episode is sponsored by DS, a team of makers, marketers, and entrepreneurs that help businesses transform their brand experience and unlock growth like never before. Are you a CMO, founder, or business leader looking to level up your brand and marketing? Head over to weareds.com and let's explore what is next for your business. That's weareds.com. Visit us to learn more.
So when that great news happens, it sounds like rainbows and sunshine, but I'd imagine as a guy who's already burnt out, already working, around the clock, got a young kiddo at home, a wife is probably like, where the hell's my husband?
Yep.
I have to imagine that dealing with supply chain, dealing with getting that product and all the ambitious demands that the Targets and the Walmarts of the world, how did that affect you mentally? How did that affect you from a business perspective? Because, when I think, we're whole people, right? So it's not just rainbows and sunshine. So break that down for us because, so far the story sounds, very cherry, it's the young guy who becomes successful, but I have to imagine there's some dark days in there. So take us to that point because that's what this audience, let's get real. We're all here. So
yeah, I think it goes back. Like I have almost no regrets in my life, right? As a whole, from a business standpoint, that's where kind of my first regret comes in.
Talk about it.
We didn't have a CFO or equivalent. And what happened was while we got accepted into Target, they're like, look, you're a little bit too expensive. Can you shave off $1 here, $2 on this product? And you're kind of like, we'll do whatever you want.
Yeah.
We're getting on the shelves at Target.
So like, here's my firstborn.
But then you have to lower all those prices on Amazon, right? And it starts to chip away at your margins. And then you have the standpoint of, okay, great. So like, here's how Target works. They want to have they want you to sit on 10 weeks of inventory per SKU before you ship the first one. And it needs to be sitting in a warehouse ready to go like 2 or 3 weeks before. So all of a sudden your cash conversion cycles are just like boom, right? For Amazon, you could make stuff, ship it, and it's turned into cash like a couple weeks later. Target, it's like a few 4, 5, 6 months.
And they never pay their fucking POs on time.
Right. You have to chase them around, right? And so, so then you have that thing too where like Amazon was net 3 days, right? It's amazing. Target was like, net 45, I think we were at when
on
we
paper.
started. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And it's like you still have to push them for it. So that's where it got real tough. That's where, that sort of profitable business, you were profitable at month 14. And that's where it started to get, pretty close to the knife's edge.
So what happens at the point? I'd imagine you probably had a lot of close call moments, like, financially, how do you weather that storm as a bootstrap, largely bootstrap, friends and family, but what do you do at that point? Do you go back to Paul and say, hey, Paul, like I need you to kick in and float us? Or
Nope. No. So you sort of cut back where you can, which is
your pocket.
Yeah, pretty much. Right. Every which way you can. And, you start to go back to your suppliers and, that also kind of encourages those discussions that probably should have happened a little bit sooner.
Sure.
Hey, where can we cut back on how do we make this more efficient? Right. I don't want to, the formula is the formula. We're not touching it. Right. That's what people fell in love with. But we need to find a way to either buy more bottles so they're cheaper or do a larger production run so it's cheaper per unit. We need to find some profit here. That's something else I learned along the road. It's like, the big CPG rules the world because they rule supply chain and they have it down to a science. And that's where, that's where all the money is, right, in supply chain.
Now, I have to imagine that there was probably a moral line that you had that kept trying to cross you that you had to keep on, which is like the best way to drop costs is to lower the quality of ingredients. And that's something that I know me and you talked about this, well before the show, was you never compromise on ingredients.
Yep.
And I want to hear more about, if you can't compromise on the number one thing that's going to do that, like where do you find the money? Where do you find that stuff?
Yeah. That's a big piece of it, right? Is to kind of sit there and I'd hear these stories, right, from other brand owners where they had, heard, like Whole Foods has a really high standard to get into Whole Foods in terms of their ingredient. Or they did.
Yeah.
Maybe
I was going to say.
And I'd hear about these stories where these brands would get in and they'd have like special batches made just for Whole Foods testing.
I've heard this before,
right?
yeah.
And so,
and then once you get past the line, then you can they look the other way, kind of thing.
And then the consumers are getting, something that's not as good.
Yeah.
And that stuff blew my mind, right? And same thing when the coupon reviews were happening on Amazon, blew my mind. Like I always ran. So when we went through diligence, when you fast forwarding to the sale, and people are kind of like, well, you should be nervous and stuff. Like I was like, there are no skeletons at all, right? It is squeaky clean in here, right? You can go ahead and reverse engineer this, reverse chromatography, find out whatever ingredients in here. It is what we say it is. And we ran everything. We ran a tight ship. So yeah, so a lot of it was we had enough margins, but like you started to shrink real fast. And so what we did was, part of that Amazon relationship was, I don't know if they have it anymore, Amazon lending was a thing.
Yep. Yeah. A finance capital business. Yeah.
Yeah. And so we had the ability to take money and we did.
Nice.
And so that kind of helped float us for a bit until we could get our heads above water a little bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, that initial sort of target surge was, and then like you don't launch as well as you hope. You think you're going to put it on the shelf and these things are just going to blow out, right?
But nobody knows it. So you got to market. You got to, yeah.
And then you get there and you realize like, all right, we had these white labels, we had these chrome logos on them, and they're like super beautiful in a setting like this, right, against a dark background. But you go to Target and they have white shelves and they have 4,000, bright lights, and they're invisible.
Yep.
And so we had to do some rebranding and just sort of add some more color to it. And it was tough. And then at that point, you have a small team, and then you take your eye off the ball a little bit with Amazon because you're focused on Target. And then Walmart calls, and so you take your eye off the ball a little bit more with Amazon, and that's where
wheels on the bus start falling off.
Yeah, that's where things get really tough. They get really tough because you want to serve the customer really well, and you don't want to forget about that Amazon business. But then you have all these people in your ear saying like, well, if you want a big exit, you're going to have to diversify your revenue. So you're focusing on retail. Then you're starting to talk about D2C. You need to have this blend, right? It needs to be like half retail and then the other 25% split between Amazon and D2C.
Did you want to have it when you started this business? Were you thinking towards exit, or were you thinking lifestyle, just good business, making good money?
Was not thinking about exit.
Interesting.
And then we got an offer in 2018 before we got into Target.
So before you're even on shelves there?
Yeah.
Wow.
Silly offer.
They just reached out to you?
Yeah.
So that email comes in. What do you say? What's the first person you talk to? Is it your wife?
I talked to an investment banker that had been sort of keeping in touch with us, and he's like, "Look, I'll do this sort of pro bono and like have the conversation. Like I'll sort of help represent you. I'm not going to put anything together really, but I'll come and I'll have the meeting with you guys." And I'll never forget. Like we had this. It was like basically me. So we had this like 10-page slide deck that I put together, and I'm not a designer. I'm not a creative at all. And I remember them.
Could have fooled me.
I remember them looking at it and being like, this is it? And I'm like, look, you can look at our numbers, you can look at our sales, you can look at our conversion rate, you can look at our NPS, right? All these like key metrics. But yeah, in terms of like, we don't have back office stuff together. And yeah, they put this like pretty big offer on the table.
Wow.
And, my wife and I still talk about it sometimes like, hey, should we have taken that? And I was like, you know what? All the sort of gray hairs and accelerated wisdom that I've gained from that point until today.
I don't see any gray hair, by the way.
Yeah.
We got good lighting here, Kiki, huh? I don't see any gray hairs. Yeah.
So all that is 100% worth it, right? Like I wouldn't be in the position I am right now if, I don't want to say it's the easy way out because maybe we'd do it the second time around, but like I needed to have that kick in the ass. I needed to be pushed down to the ground. I needed to really realize that the world can be a really tough and dirty place. And, you deal with a lot of people that you don't want to deal with, but if you deal with them and you deal with them successfully and you keep fighting and you keep pushing and persevering, it makes you so much stronger. And I think like that's something where it's going to help me as a father kind of portray that and sort of teach my kids about that.
So talk to me about like, what would Sean today say to Sean back then? Because you talked about a couple of regrets. You said, I didn't build a social strategy. You talked about a couple other regrets, which I'd love for you to unpack. But like, what would Sean today, if you had Sean as an advisor, say to Sean that was in the thick of it back then? What would you have done differently? Or that you wish you had done a little bit different? Because I always love the lessons that come from, hindsight, which is not 2020.
Yeah. I think, so at the time that we were, and I don't talk about this much, but like at the time we were doing pretty well in the business, 16, 17, 18, when things were going well, we were paying ourselves decent salaries, Paul and I. We were taking a little bit of distributions out of the company. The company was doing well enough to where we had an E-Trade account going that we were funneling money into every single month as like a rainy day fund. Because we had profit and we're like, all right, let's put it into like just blue chip stocks, Visa and MasterCard, that kind of stuff. And so, we were in that position, and then, when that dries up, but that's a tough position to be in. You sort of have this, all right, I have a little bit of a cushion now. I don't feel like I'm poor. I'm working and I'm making some money. But at the same time, like I think from a business standpoint, a business leadership standpoint, 100% CFO is top of that list. CFO. And so like CFO has been involved in dad mode since like 4 months ago.
How'd you find your CFO?
So we found him through just networking with a lot of different folks. What I was looking for was the number 2 to a CFO of an exited CPG company. And so I found the number 2 to the CFO at Amplify, which is Skinny Pop.
Yeah, I know.
So, sale to Hershey, IPO, that stuff. And yeah, like he's great. And so he is involved in this company as an advisor from the outset. And
so I want to unpack that because that's really interesting, and this is, I think, a key insight for those, because I know we're going to get this question. They're going to go, I've never hired a CFO before, Sean. I'm not a finance person.
Yep.
How do I hire a good CFO? And what I heard you say is you sort of tracked to where's the puck going, where I want to be, who's been there, done that.
Yep.
And then you seeked out not that person, but the person who was doing the real work behind that person.
Yep.
And you found that person. So I'd imagine that type of person at a typical full comp package is going to be out of the reach of an early stage founder, right? So what's some strategies that you can give, some cheat codes you can give for somebody where they find that person in their own respective thing. How do they make the pitch? How do they put together a compelling offering so they can get a little bit of that brain share, that mind share from a CFO? So start with that, and then tell us what you think makes for a good CFO, and be as general as you can. Because remember, we got people from all walks and talks of life.
I think that going to that number 2 or number 3 person is key. I think going to them on a fractional standpoint to start, if possible, is ideal. I think that you'd be silly if you're not thinking that you're going to give up equity, because you are, right? Any good CFO is going to require some equity, or at least some ability to earn equity or equity. We had phantom equity because we were an LLC. So I think on a fractional standpoint, you could get enough done. You can get enough bang for your buck for somebody, 5-10 hours a week for them to go in and like really, I think you need to have, so what he told us is like, you need to have a staff accountant, preferably a controller, so that the numbers were sound, at least, whether or not they're good or not is another thing, but at least they're sound and predictable and reliable. And then he can go ahead and build a model around it.
Right.
And then really kind of dissect that. And then he can go have a conversation with the manufacturer, the head of supply chain, and then really start to dissect the business. I think that was the big thing for me, kind of looking at that as though, my partner at the time ran this financial publishing newsletter company. Newsletters is like software, right? Like 80-point margins.
Crazy,
right? It's a much different business than CPG. So that was a really big thing that I think that while we hired on Jay as a full timer, we had worked with some fractionals before that, and those sort of helped. But I feel like you need somebody in your space, and that's where the kind of differentiating point was with Jay. It was like he understood CPG, and he also, I think the thing when I looked, I talked to him, and I talked to his former boss. The thing that stuck out to me was he's not afraid to ask about things he doesn't know. And whether it's to me or somebody else, he's like, I'll call an investment banker that I used to work with, or I'll call an accountant that I used to work with, or I'll call my former CFO and ask him this. And where a lot of people would have, and I talked to somebody about this recently, where the CFO had such hubris, right? And was like, fucking know everything, right?
Yep.
And that was it. And he's like, the guy lasted 6 months and like put us in a hole.
Yeah.
You need to, especially like somebody coming in like that, they have to be sort of a little bit humble. They have to know that they don't know everything.
Yeah.
And I come from that standpoint every single day. And so I think that's a really, really important part of sort of filtering for somebody like that.
Super, super great piece of wisdom there. So let's talk about some bright spots. So, you go through the sweat, you go through that moment, and the deal's going to get done. And you're going to sell this business. And this is the first business you've sold, right? At this point in your life.
Yeah.
Is that right? So, I know, some of us get really granular in the details. I think, we're not going to get into all the weeds in this one, but like, let's talk about how it felt. Where were you? The deal gets done. The deal gets signed. The acquirer comes in. What's that feel like? Where are you? I'm sure you remember like it's yesterday. You're in this place with this person. Like, what's it feel like? Take us to that moment when the deal gets done.
So yeah, I'm in my office. The team knows something's going on.
How long was this process, bell to bell?
So it was really long. We actually started a process in late 2019.
Okay. So pre-COVID.
Formal process. Went through first round of bids, all these meetings, et cetera, et cetera. The team sort of knew what was going on, right?
Okay. And they knew that they were going to be incentivized in some way, so they kind of stuck around. And
yeah. And so we got second round of bids the second week of February.
Okay.
And then the world fell apart of February 2020, right? Pencils down, back to just operating the business. Nobody was doing acquisition. Like everything dried up at that point, right? And so we kept operating the business. And then, the business was growing, right? We were selling hand sanitizer and disinfectant and surface cleaner and all these, like, we felt like Apple for, a few months, right? It's like everything we put out there was selling like hotcakes.
And supply chain didn't break down for you?
Oh, it did.
Okay.
Like 2 weeks
for everybody else. Yeah.
2 months, right? That's about as long as it took us.
Yeah.
And so at that 2 month mark, we're dealing with supply chain woes, which is really tough, especially as a capital, constrained business. And, in the fall, we started to go back to the drawing board like, hey, do some of these companies want to come back in? And they were, kind of got some cold feet. Like, I don't know which way's up. I don't know if your business is going to be
They're
huge.
bleeding in other areas. So they're just like, I don't want to bleed more, too much risk.
That's exactly right. And so we decided to hire a couple of execs to kind of beef up the team, because it was either going to be this, okay, the business keeps going up and we're going to get some PE money and sort of build this thing to the moon, or maybe we'll sell it. Right. And so so we did that over the fall and the winter of into 21. Mm-hmm. And then in the spring of 21, we went back to the drawing boards and realized like there were some okay offers out there for PE, but the acquirers were really hot and heavy on the brand. And so we started to have a lot of inbounds from these, CPG aggregators, Amazon aggregators. And, we were averse to it because we didn't want to be lumped into that. It's like we didn't focus on just Amazon. Like we had a real business here. Right. And so we found one that had a lot of conviction in what we were doing and was like, hey, look, we have all these other brands and like some of them belong in retail. Some of them should have a better D2C. Like you guys you're going to be the template.
Yeah. So it's a strategic fit. You got the playbook. It's working. 2 + 2 = 5.
That's right. So fast forward, we go through negotiations with them. We get some bids from the other ones, and we decide we're going to go with them. Mm-hmm. And so I'm sitting in my office, and I had somebody that I worked very closely with, and I kind of let them know, like a half hour before we were going to sign, you need to set up a meeting with everybody in the company and just say it's mandatory, right?
Mm-hmm. So everyone's freaking out at this point.
I remember.
How many are you at the time? How many employees?
About 15.
Okay. So pretty tight-knit crew still.
Yeah. Tight-knit crew.
Yeah.
Tight-knit crew. We were very tight. We still are to this day.
Love that.
And so I remember being there and we signed. We called the company that acquired us, which is a European company. And, we're on Zoom. It's like late at night there, right? It's like 10, 11 o'clock at night. People were like outside in the road and stuff, like doing stuff so they can't wake up their family, but like super excited, super jazzed about it. And I remember hanging up that call, and I think I like cried for like a minute, right? It was just
relief. Yeah.
It was a lot. It was a lot to kind of overcome. Also, like, you think to yourself, like, am I doing the right thing? Mm-hmm. What about all the people here that work for us? What about the products? Like you don't know. Like at that point, I was so stressed out.
Yeah.
And my wife kind of looked at me, weeks leading up, and she's like,
"You look like shit."
100%. That's what she said. And she talks about it to this day. And so, yeah, we got to that point, and
well, that was the first thing he says to me when I first met him. He goes, I was like, dude, like you look like Ken from a Barbie movie, like, you know, whatever. Our producer Kiki's like laughing right away. Yep. And he's like, oh, you should have seen me before. And I'm like, yeah, I don't believe it. And I met his wife, and we're talking, and it's so interesting. And we got into a whole thing on self-care and how important that is and all that. So we'll come back to that. But it's just funny that you said that. So
it was, like, you look like shit. I was in bad shape. Yeah. And yeah, so then we met with the team and we told them what was going on. And it was some excitement, some nervousness. Fear, yeah, just like what's next. And, you know, I kind of let them like, I'm in this with you. Mm-hmm. I'm gonna coach you through it. Right. I think this is the right decision for the brand.
And now we don't have to get into the details, of course, but I always ask the question, life-changing exit or not life-changing exit for you? In terms of impact it made materially in your family.
Yeah, I'd say it's life-changing. Cool. And I say that from like a not strictly financial standpoint as well.
That's what I mean. Yeah, I mean that holistically, right? Yeah. So that happens, and you agree, I'd imagine, to stay on for a period of time. That's as
2.5 years.
Okay. So what's that like going from like the guy who's been looking in the mirror at his boss for the last probably 15 years at this point, right, of your life, from, you know, detailing cars to all the different things you've done, to now you've got a boss, right? Mm-hmm. They've bought you, so they own the company. You know, not a lot of people make it 2.5 years. So, you know, like talk to us about that a little bit in terms of like shifting from entrepreneur to, you know, post exit. How does life change as a post exit founder?
So I'd say that, you know, one key moment was, so the days leading after felt exactly the same.
Right. Yeah.
Felt exactly
it's like business as usual. We got numbers to hit. Let's keep going. Yeah.
I mean, like we had bought a house and we closed on it like 2 days after we closed on the sale of the business, which was like the craziest week of our entire life.
This is still Austin?
Yeah, still Austin. And so everything felt the same. And then I remember we got a cease and desist. No, we didn't get a cease and desist. We got some like threatened lawsuit from a competitor or something, which is par for the course. We got a bunch of them. And most of them were just, actually almost all of them were just nothing. And I got it, and it like, it's one of those things where you're like, you lose sleep, right? It really bothers you. And I remember, and I sent it over to them. I was like, I don't even know who to send this to. I'll just send it to the chief legal officer. And, you know, I was like, we need to have a call on this right away. And he's like, look, we'll have a call on it towards the end of the day. And we had a call, and I'm like, all right, I went through this, and I'm like all hyped up about it. He was like, relax. This isn't your deal anymore, man. Like, we got this. This is why I'm here. This is why our legal team is here. And I was like, holy shit, you're right. And so it was like it was like the first moment, it was a sigh of relief of,
love that,
I have some help. And so that started to snowball, right? You start to have this snowball effect of, all right, I got some help. I get some team, right? Like, and that's what we were signing up for. We're signing up for, you know, I have a marketing team and a customer service team and all these different teams.
You know, and so, true scale for you, ever since the way. Yeah,
that's right. And so, you know, it started off really good for about 6 months, and then, you know, things sort of changed in the market, and we had to change course. And then I think over time, you sort of come back to that standpoint of, I'm an entrepreneur for a reason. You know, working for somebody else is kind of tough.
Yeah. Sounds like you really love that 0 to 1. It seems like that gives you a lot of energy.
Love it.
Yeah.
Love it. I love the uncertainty of it. I know it's risky, but especially, you know, I've never touched anything B2B, but like a consumer-based business, I know that if I could look a customer in the eye or talk to them on the phone or talk to them through email, that there's going to be some momentum there to build. I'm going to be able to take something from them and build on it.
Sure.
And people don't even know. Like I analyze when I take these products and give them to people, I just watch their eyes. I watch how they react. I watch what they touch. I watch what they do first. I watch their reaction when they smell it, when they spray it, how they spray, all these different things, right?
Back to that 10-year-old kid helping mom in the garden.
It is. It's super geeky, but it's helpful for me to kind of help you know, build this customer journey.
No, I love that. So your time ends at Puracy. You move on. Mm-hmm. At what point does the idea hit you that it's like, all right, back to building from square one, time to build a new company? Because, you know, most people, they exit and they have a couple of choices, right? They could stick with the acquirer. They could kind of go and, you know, live on some of the means and be intelligent with how they spend their money, or go do something different. So like, when did the entrepreneurial itch strike again? And then take us to the journey of like, why dad mode? Why now? And what the hell is this company? And talk about it.
Yeah. So it happened kind of quickly after we sold, actually. Like I started to, once I pulled back and realized like I didn't have to think about every square inch of the business. I just had to focus on, managing the team, motivating the team, setting the strategic vision, and then obviously sales, right? Sales and business development is really my key job. But that was so much less than what I was doing before. It felt like it almost felt like a part-time job, right? And so my brain sort of opened up at the first time of looking at things. And then I also realized like we missed a lot of things, right? I talked about social media before. I talked about retail strategy and how that works with your D2C and Amazon strategy, the CFO, like all these things started to come together and you're like,
I could do this better.
Yeah. I feel like I screwed this up. And so, but at the same time, on a personal level, I started to spend a lot more time with my family and my daughter at the time. And then my son, who was born right around the time, right before we sold the company. And I was like, well, this is what it's about. Like, yes, like you dump your life into this company, you try to build it and stuff, but like for what? Right.
Yeah.
And that was the point where I realized you can do this and also be, a great father and a great leader and role model. And so like some of those tough days, you start to think about, your head naturally as a human goes into negative places. Like what,
of course,
like I'm really obsessed. It's like, you want to fight somebody and then you have to think about your kids and like, how do you want your kids to see you? Like, and also somebody told me once, like, when you're making decisions behind closed doors, when you talk about, when you needed to, squeak more margins out, and do you make the product worse, right? And not tell anybody?
Yep.
I just thought
that was a hell no for you. Yeah.
Yeah. I just thought about if my daughter was in the room and saw me do that, would I be proud of that?
Yeah.
Right.
Love that.
So for me, it was
kids keep us flying straight, don't they?
They do. Like, and they also do a great job highlighting all your weaknesses, right? They just call them out. So,
amen.
I sat there and I started to look at, I started looking at the landscape and I said, okay, 2020 happens. This hybrid sort of work schedule is prolific in the United States. And then with that naturally becomes this accelerated shift of more shared responsibilities around the household. Dad's working from home. Dad's going to help out around the house. And so you just saw this shift. And then I looked at the market in cleaning and I kind of said, I've been in cleaning since I was 16, in some way, shape, or form. I know the market well. I know where the technology is going. And I think the technology is important. But I think the bigger thing is that all of the household cleaning brands are targeted at women. And so why not take a page from Dr. Squatch or Everyman Jack or Dude Wipes or whatever and create some cleaning products for dads that they'd be a little bit more empowered to use. So we thought about, from a standpoint of Yeti, right? It's not by accident that these are matte black metal. They have a bit of nostalgia in the logo, and then you have these masculine scents, but not too masculine, right? We went through this whole scent process of, dads really like this tobacco and leather scent that I had put together. And I was like, yeah, it's not going to work. Like you can't send your kids to school smelling like tobacco and leather. And so
you could, but then you're just an asshole.
That's right. That's right. Like, who's your dad? So, I wanted it to be a little bit of a badge of honor, right? Like dad cleaned the kitchen, right? He sprayed down the counters and cleaned the kitchen. It could be just a few minutes. And then, and then it really took hold when I started to find some data on.
Yeah, I was going to say, dig into that because like, you mentioned when someone picks up the product, you're paying attention to every detail. Mm-hmm. What was that like driving consumer insight? And you shared it, so I'm not going to share it because it's yours to share. But what was that driving insight that like hit you, and then you mapped it back to data, and you go, you know what? Boom, there's greenfield here that no one's thinking about. Because when you said it to me at first, I was like, I'll be back. I'm going to get my checkbook, and that was like the first time. Quite literally, now I have my checkbook, but going back, take us through that.
So I mentioned social. That was a miss. I knew that it had to be a hit this time, right? I knew that branding, we never did any formal branding work. We never did any formal consumer research. I was all just sort of hacked together. So we hired a branding firm. We hired a design firm to do these bottles, these designs. Like we spent a lot of time doing it. But the big thing was like, how do we hit on social? And you have to hit on social, at least what I found, in this target demographic for dads. And we chose dads because instead of men, because kids from 0 to 14 make the most messes. So they're the highest consumers. They're also help usher in products like this that mom typically is the one that's the gatekeeper for. But the big thing was finding these couple of studies and then really driving it home and then sort of, testing it out in terms of the messaging was dads who clean more get laid more. And that was it. Right. And it's like, you think about it and you're like, oh yeah, it's like, well, if I'm chipping in around the house more, my wife's going to pay attention. My kids are going to pay attention. My wife's going to be a little bit more connected to me because like I'm actually helping out and doing things around the house. And it sort of opens it up as though it's not all on my wife now. And we sort of saw that. And I said, well, that's going to be our rally cry, this whole thing. And then you start to dig into it and you're like, all right, chore play is a real thing. Right. And it's not about necessarily like dad's going to do everything now. It's like dad's going to chip in more. Dad's going to do a little bit more.
I feel like an idiot asking this, but what's chore play?
Chore play. Instead of foreplay, it's chore play. So like you doing chores is like an act of service or a love language for your wife. Chore play is the hashtag, I guess I should say, that has some posts behind it on social.
No, that's cool.
And then
I hadn't heard that term because hopefully my wife doesn't watch this because she's going to be like, you need to get on some chore play. I'm just like, no, I'm going to get on hiring a housekeeper, but which we do have. But the woman historically, I've done a lot of work in CPG, is typically our chief purchase officer in a lot of ways, making the decisions for what goes in the home, in our kids' bodies, on our kids' bodies, et cetera. When you think about dad mode, what's the market look like for, dudes who clean, to talk about like, the dude wipes and that sort of thing. Like what's that market look like? I want you to understand that, or maybe you could share a little bit more with the audience just on that unique insight. Cause I was blown away when you shared it with me. It totally struck me in a different way.
So what we found was dads are cleaning more, right? They are chipping in a bit more. This was really something that helps nudge them a little bit further. And then also the guys who are sitting on the sidelines right now, it sort of has like, hey, step up a little bit. Like if you want to get some, then you got to give some. So those were kind of the big things that
if you want to get some, you got to give some. I like that.
So those were the big things. And like, I think the sort of underlying theme here though is just much deeper, right? So you have this great soundbite that you work off of, and then you have this social strategy where you kind of build around this suggestive humor, which has been tremendously fun. Our brand launch video is awesome, and like a lot of the social following up on it, and people love it, and it really kind of clicks for people. And they take it on the surface, and that's great, but like underlying, it is. When you're a parent of young kids, you are in the trenches, right? It's like you are going all out all day at work, and then you get home, and then it's like, I am a dad instantly, or a mom or whatever.
Job 1, job 2, job 3. Yeah.
And you're just going. And it is very, very easy to neglect your spouse, right? You don't have you're like, oh, when's the last time we went on a date? I don't know, like last year or something. And so like all these things start to, you don't write notes to each other anymore. Like the sort of acts of generosity and love language, that this sort of spark sort of goes away a little bit. So this is a little bit of an underlying theme of trying to kind of jumpstart some of that stuff again.
How has dad mode changed you as a husband, changed you as a father? Because I imagine you're very much embodying this lifestyle for this product and brand you're creating.
Yep. Like
talk about the shift. And if I was to have your wife on the show, how would you say Sean's different now with dad mode because of these reasons? Just so I know. And we don't have to talk about your sex life. I just mean the other stuff.
I think it's, like I said, with Puracy, I gave so much to it. And at the end of the day, you're hoping for, I don't know, you're always hoping for something better, right?
Sure.
You're like, I wish it was this much better. And I think that the reality is that it's still a business, and I love it, and I put my passion and my blood, sweat, and tears into it. But at the end of the day, like family is the most important thing. And for me with this, it's like, I need to be able to create a brand that has some balance, in my life. I know how to do this. I've done it before. I've been down this path before. I know what needs to be done. We're not sending people to Mars with this brand, right? I mean, and I applaud those people that are doing that. But for us, it's like you sort of need to live the brand. And I think that shift that you talk about is me being present. Me, when I go down and I work out in the basement in the morning, my kids are down there too, and they're sort of kids' gym area next to my gym area, and they're doing stuff. And then we go up and we sort of have breakfast together, and then I go to work and they go to school, and that's that. So like having that balance rather than me sort of leaving before my daughter even gets up, and then I see her for a half an hour at night, I think is a a really healthy thing. And that won't always be the case,
of course.
Right? As you know, as a business owner, there are days where you're like, I need to work until 11 o'clock at night. I need to burn his Saturday morning, right? I need to go travel for this. And I think that it's really important that the kids see that, right?
Yeah.
If you have this fairy tale ending and you're in your 30s, it's kind of like, I don't know if you're necessarily kind of teaching them that grit that I'm trying to get to. And that's, the thing that I love about the Northeast too, is like that grit that sort of is contagious around that New York metro area.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I think, what I was sort of poking at, just knowing you on and off the show, is like, the idea of dad mode's like flipping a light switch, right? It's like you go from like, I'm an entrepreneur, no, okay, now I'm in dad mode, or I'm in husband mode. And I think that, the idea of, dads doing more, I think is a big thing. My dad wasn't a part of the house cleaning and that sort of thing. And I think, just being more present and being, co-parenting and doing whatever, versus like the old, like, time in the 50s when there was a separation. So I think that, that there's an interesting thing that I think lives underneath the humor, more than some of the kind of provocative stuff that starts to catch. So talk about the vision for the brand, because I think what I also loved about Dad Mode is that, when I was doing my own kind of due diligence, pre-investment, was like, what's the market look like? How many dudes are cleaning? Dads are cleaning? Will women who are doing some of the cleaning want to have those products in the house? It turned out to be, yes, they will. And yes, they do, from the data I saw. But also, these are really clean products, right? And in a world now where people really care about what they put in and on their body, we look at what's happened with the food system in America. We look at some of these different things, what's in that bottle is a hell of a lot better than what's under my sink. Well, we actually are pretty good under sink right now, but, and that better end up underneath the sink, I guess now. But you get the point, is like, talk about what's in the bottle too, because we see outside the bottle, we see the vibe. But I want to hear more about the vision for this business. Where is Dad Mode going? How can people get involved? How can people support you? Because I think a lot of people listen to this show, we want to be present, in our spouses' lives, in our families' lives. And I think that Dad Mode is sort of a gateway to do that, and what it stands for. Yeah. No, you bring up a great point. I think that what our approach was with the actual product, right, is, efficacy first, right? That's super important. It needs to work well. I think that, going back to my detailing world, that's always been my ethos, is like, people will use stuff that will melt your skin off as long as it works better than anything else, right? That's how detailers think. And I don't necessarily think that that's the right way to do it, but in terms of household products, you have something like stain remover, as I mentioned, it needs to work. It needs to work the first time, period, end of story. Otherwise, you don't have a shot. They're going back to what they used before. So for us, this is our gateway drug, is the stain remover. Stain remover leads into the laundry detergent. Then you're in the laundry room. Then you're gold, because people only change their laundry detergents 4 or 5 times in their life. So that's huge. How we get there from Mom's standpoint, because she's the chief purchasing officer, as you said, is, the ingredients are over 95% natural, which these days should be table stakes, right? Like, they are as good as petrochemicals and harsher chemicals. It's not, but that's sort of step one. Step two, aluminum bottles, right? Everything's plastic. Everything's plastic. Plastic waste, microplastics, it's just, it's almost a 4-letter word at this point. And so we wanted to come out with that, because we knew that when moms look at it, they're going to be like, all right, what are the ingredients? And then what is it packaged in? That was the big thing I took away from Puracy, was like, that's what they cared about. Yeah. Big. Yeah. No plastic. So it's like, we have no plastic in our house at all.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's huge. And then, from the fragrance standpoint, it's a natural fragrance. It's a little bit skewing masculine, it's sandalwood and suede. It's skewing masculine, but it's probably like 65% masculine, the rest feminine. So when women smell it, they're like, oh, I really like this, right? And that way, if you're doing laundry, your clothes don't smell like something that you hate. So those are kind of the ways that we're breaking into that mom buying cycle. Because I think that at the end of the day, we launched online because that's what I know, but that's what the data said. The data said, from all our consumer research, was that's all men purchase online, period, end of story, right? They rarely go into stores. So we launch online, D2C, Amazon, and then we start to kind of leverage those relationships I had at Target and Walmart. We go back and have meetings this summer. We have meetings with Home Depot, Lowe's, Ace Hardware.
Awesome.
Perfect fit for men, dads, and they've also moved a lot of their cleaning assortments to the fronts of the store.
Right.
And then we find which retail partner is best and which one wants to have us and give us the biggest assortment. And then we commit to them for launch it in 26.
Nice.
And that's the play, is that It needs to be in retail. And then I think at that point, and the thing that I'm most interested to kind of see is like, where does that split happen? Like how many men are buying versus women? I still think like it's going to be a decent portion of women buying, whether they're buying for themselves or they're buying for their husband.
What are you learning so far? Because I mean, so where do I go online and check this out?
So you go to godadmode.com. We sell it there now. Next week we'll be on Amazon. That's when we launch on Amazon.
How's it going so far? Soft launch?
Going great.
Awesome.
It's going great. The feedback has been awesome. I mean, this week, like New Orleans got 8 inches of snow. So like we're shipping in the worst possible week we can. So, we had a couple of damages, but like not bad at all. I mean, I dealt with that in the past. So like we over-engineered these bottles and the closures. But the feedback's been awesome. People love the scent. They love the usage of it. And I think the biggest thing, which I'm happy about, is they're resonating with the concept.
Yeah.
Concept of dad's doing more around the house, this concept of chore play. And that was the big win for me to kind of see out of the gates.
It's huge. No, that's awesome. I'm really excited. And I think, the audience is going to connect with this, I think, on a different level as well. So no, I think we've covered a number of different things. What didn't we cover today that you're like, you know what? I really hope that Pete and the guys kind of brought this up on the show today.
I think we covered a lot actually. I think one of the things I was thinking about in terms of how we do things a little bit differently and why I love sort of that digital approach first, why you can't have as nuanced as a conversation as you can in the past with Amazon customers. I think that sort of shifts to D2C and social, and I think people are a lot more vocal regardless and more willing to. So I think opening up that communication is huge for the growth of this brand, to really kind of hear from people directly. And I also think that becomes a real competitive advantage for us because these large brands, I've seen it. Like I've now worked in a much larger company.
Yep.
It never gets to the top. It never gets to the decision maker. It always gets pushed down to how things are run nowadays out of spreadsheets, right? Yeah. It's like, so I think this data without depth, right? Like, oh, we're making a natural product because natural is a buzzword and that's what we're going to do. And like, they don't even know why that matters in the consumer's mind. And I think that us being able to sort of follow that sort of journey in the customer mindset of how they're thinking about these things is going to allow us to kind of get out in front. And I think we've seen that with, brands like Liquid Death.
Sure. So. No, I love that. And one thing we didn't talk about, I'll just touch on it really quick before we wrap up, but I think this has been a great conversation. Always love talking to people I actually know on and off the pod, which is always fun because it doesn't always happen. You were a one-man band who did 10 million by yourself before bringing on anybody else in the business. I think today with the power of AI that you can do 100 million or more as a solopreneur. Obviously you're doing this company right. You're building the infrastructure the right way, raising funds and doing the right things. But, my newest company, which is taking off like a rocket ship. I mean, I've built a ton of companies over the years, is really going into companies and helping people do AI-driven design for their organization, whether that's, org design or process design or automation. I have never sold anything in my life where in the first conversation, before I even finish the second slide, people are like, how much and when can you start? And I'm having that happen right now with AI stuff. So I feel like with me spending so much time in AI, if I didn't ask you, how is AI going to contribute to Dad Mode's success and how are you leveraging AI right now in the early onset of the company, I would not be Pete. So talk to me about your take on AI. How is it changing the game of e-commerce and how is it going to change the way that Sean builds Dad Mode?
I think that for me, I am in it every day, dozens of queries across all the 4 or 5 major platforms. Like I have them all open. I may query the same thing across them. And that ranges drastically. Like yesterday it was, help me choose an affiliate platform, right? And why? And like, here's what I'm looking to do. And, you start to, break it down further.
What are your favorite AI platforms that you're like, can't live without?
So I use ChatGPT primarily.
Okay.
But they all sort of shift. They all like Gemini 1.5 came out, right? And it's like that. It's pretty awesome. So I think, there's that and then, Grok and Claude. And so I think that using them a lot and just trying to challenge yourself as to like, what do I query? Right. I think it's a big thing. It's like, where do I start? And it's like, well, just start somewhere.
Yeah.
And then thinking about, I think on the consumer side, I brought up that point of like natural products, right? Well, I think that people now have this at their fingertips and they want to know like, well, why? I know I'm supposed to buy natural products, or I know I'm supposed to buy organic produce. Well, why? And like, what's important about it? And what is it? And so I think that the sort of, the knowledge that people gain is going to be much greater. And I think that we have a much more educated audience that we're going out and talking to. And you just can't BS them. You can't. And I think that's really important to, for us, we're staying deep in it. And then like our CTO is, using it for code and things like that. And I think you have to use it. You have to keep challenging yourself and like what you can do. We've used it for a lot of different writing stuff. I mean, we've, tweaked like our terms of service to put it in dad mode lingo, right? Mm-hmm. Things that I'm not going to do, but I love when you find a brand that is on brand all the way down to like the privacy policy. I love it.
Yeah. What I'll say is if you're a brand builder today and you're building something, I'm sure you've heard of the term reverse information arbitrage. Have you heard of this term? So if you're not familiar with that, I'll just kind of really break it down super simple. We used to come from the world of search engines. Now we're in the world of answer engines, where basically what you can do now is you can actually use these AIs and large language models to tell them to generate what questions you should be asking. So previously you'd had to know what to ask Google. You had to know what to ask the thing. Nowadays, you can actually rely on these AIs to generate the questions for you, generate the prompts for you, go out and do the research for you, dump a spreadsheet into it, tell me the words, the language, that sort of thing. So if you're not using AI in every aspect of your workflow, you're hugely missing out. I'll put a bunch of stuff in the show notes for you folks so you can check it out. I'd love to nerd out with you a little bit more offline. We'll put all that stuff in the show notes. Definitely, if you haven't checked out the Dad Mode brand, check it out. I'll include a link to the YouTube video. The launch ad is freaking hilarious. I mean, I must have spit out my coffee twice on that thing. But Sean, this has been an awesome episode.
Thank you, Pete.
I've had a really, really good time. And just to remind everybody else, stay forward obsessed. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to Forward Obsessed. Please share this episode, subscribe, and leave a review on your podcast app. If you'd like to contact our team, visit us at forwardobsessed.com.